A lot of times we don't know what we don't know. And when we're caregiving, we're kind of just guessing as we go along. And if you admit that you don't know, then there's room for you to grow and there's room for you to learn how to properly care for your loved ones. And sometimes it's hard for people to take advice or sometimes even constructive criticism. However, when you're caring for someone, and caregiving is not your field, right? It's talking about an adult child. We're even talking about a spouse that find themselves in the role of caregiving. And sometimes what I've seen at Right Choice Home Care or being a caregiver in the past is that a lot of times they feel as if it's their responsibility to care for their loved one. Yes and no. Yes, it's your responsibility to care for your loved one, but there are many different ways that you can show how to care for your loved one. Caregiving is not your field. You're not experiencing giving care. You can hurt yourself and your loved one. So the way you can go about showing your loved one that you do care and you want them to get the best care that they can get is by hiring someone. And that's admitting to yourself that you don't know much about caregiving. This leaves room for you to be the spouse, or it leaves room for you to be the daughter or the son, or in whatever capacity that relationship is. And so we find ourselves in a situation where we're caregiving and then there's resentment and then there's anger. I think I've talked about this in one of my previous episodes, but it stays true. It's exactly what happens. And when you don't know what you're doing, and you don't admit that you don't know what you're doing, you're hurting yourself and your loved one. And a lot of times when that resentment kicks in and then there's that neglect of care, then there's frustration. So what is the goal of the conversation is to learn or even admit to yourself that you don't know what you should be doing as a caregiver. You can read books, you can look at online videos, but not until you find yourself in that capacity of a caregiver is when you're trying to figure out what to do and how to do it and even where to turn for resources. There's nothing wrong with admitting. There's no shame in admitting that you don't know how to do this because truly that's not I'm going to say it's not your role, honestly. Your role is to continue to be the spouse, continue to be the daughter, and continue to be the son. So it's important that conversation is had. And the goal is to learn what we can do to help you better care for your loved one. One of the biggest mistakes caregivers make when tracking symptoms or medication for doctors is not tracking. That's the first thing is they don't track, they don't take notes, they don't write down signs and symptoms, they blow signs and symptoms off, they don't pay attention to what's going on with their loved ones. And when they get to the doctor, it's, oh, well, I didn't know that. Oh, well, I didn't think about that. Oh, I wasn't sure I was supposed to be keeping track. Medications have different symptoms and may have adverse reactions to your loved ones. And sometimes it takes about 2 weeks for the body to adjust to a particular medication. And sometimes what will happen is a loved one will say, oh, well, it's not working when the body needs time to adjust. So you take that time, you make documentation, and you say, okay, for instance, my husband or my wife or my mom or dad started taking this medication on this date, and these are the things that we've seen happen to them. So when the doctor calls, or you even calling the doctor to say, hey, doc, I think maybe the dosage is too strong or the dosage is not enough, but allowing enough time for that medication to kick in. And I'm glad that we're having this topic because we're going to have a pharmacist on real soon and we'll get to talk about some things like this. And so it's important that we understand the side effects of those medications. That's one of the biggest things that we need to track, the side effects of those medications. And then what is the simplest fix? Documentation. Have a tiny little notebook where a pocket-sized notebook you can keep around in your purse or, something handy that you carry your tools around, and you can make notes to say, okay, and talk to mom or dad or your loved one to say, okay, you've taken the medication. What have you noticed? Or if they have dementia and you are the caregiver, then you definitely want to make notes of what's going on with your loved ones while they're taking that medication. And how can a caregiver quickly get organized and get grounded in the facts. When you get that medication, ensure that the dosage is accurate, number one. Number two, ensure that that is the right medication that your loved one is supposed to be taking. Medication management is one of the reasons why seniors land themselves in the hospital. And so getting organized, making documentation, writing down the side effects are all important things that you should have notes for. So when you present this information to the physician, you can have some information to back up your claim. What is the most common self-sabotaging mistake I see caregivers make when it comes to asking for help? Is that they don't ask for help. They think they can do it all. And we've talked about that do it all syndrome before. You can't do everything. You can't be everything to everyone. And a lot of times what I see is that spouse that will say, oh, well, it's my responsibility to take care of my wife or my husband. I promised them that I would. Yes, you promise them that you will take care of them, but providing the best care is truly your responsibility, and ensuring that to get people that know exactly what they're doing. Train caregivers. Or if you are feeling as if though you don't want to bring any help in, because a lot of times what we see is older people are afraid to have new people or even skeptical. And I get it. You know, there's fraud out there. And sometimes what we see is they really want the help, but they don't want someone in their home. And so you can't have it both ways. You're going to have to trust someone at some point, or you'll find yourself in a situation where you're being cared for as well. And it goes for the adult children. You have your own lives. You have grandchildren, you have your children, you running them back and forth to activities, and finding someone to help in between those times. And you can visit mom or dad and just be that daughter or that son to come and visit instead of being that caregiver. It's important that we ask for help. Realize that you cannot do everything by yourself. You cannot do this by yourself. And when you realize that you cannot do this by yourself and you're taking time away from your own care or your children or even your grandchildren or even your parents that you're caring for, you're taking time away from them because you're busy doing the laundry, you're busy running them back and forth to appointments, you're busy doing all these other tasks that you can hire a caregiver to do from a reputable company. So don't feel like if you're not doing it, it's not going to get done. That's that do it all syndrome that we talked about in our previous episode. So asking for help, there's no shame in that. The shame is not asking for help and finding yourself in a situation where you need a caregiver. One of the biggest emotional mistakes caregivers make that leads to resentment and emotional collapse is, again, not asking for help, one, thinking you can do it all, and then taking time away from your own family if you're an adult child caring for a senior. I'll give you an example. I went in to do a home consultation, and it was an older lady. And when I sat down and had a conversation with her, her daughter wanted mom to get this help. The daughter was the one that reached out and she said, you know what, I really need some help with my mom. And I would like for you to come in and have a consultation and sit with us and tell us about your services. And so when I did go in there and sit and talk with them, and the mom said with the daughter at the table, my daughter is going to take care of me. It is her responsibility to do that. I was left speechless. I truly was. To hear this mom say that it was her daughter's responsibility to care for her and she wasn't going to get any outside help. No, it's not that she couldn't afford it. She certainly could afford it. And she made it very clear that she wasn't going to get help because it was her daughter's responsibility to do that. I felt terrible for the daughter. I truly did, because here we are in a situation where she's had to take time out from her own family, her children, her husband, to come and care for her mom. And her mom didn't have any cognitive impairment at all. She didn't have any mobility issues. It's just that she needed simple tasks around the house, running her to doctor's appointment. But she didn't see it fit to get any help because she wanted her daughter to take time away from her own family to care for her. No judgment there, okay? But in a situation like that, that can lead to a lot of resentment. And when that happens, I am pretty sure that that daughter probably wasn't going to be seeing her mom much anymore because her mom was not thinking about her own daughter's needs. And that can really lead to an emotional collapse. What is one firm, simple boundary a caregiver can implement today to immediately start prioritizing themselves? Now, again, we're talking about the adult child and we're talking about that spouse. So for the adult child, one of the things that you can do is have a conversation. Have that conversation with your parents and find out what plans they have in place in the event that they should need care. Or if there is a situation where care is immediately needed, then that conversation still needs to be had about who's going to do it and when it's going to get done and the role that you're going to play in caregiving. So prioritizing yourself is very important, and it starts with having that conversation. The same for the spouse. You can't do it alone, and having your adult children involved in that again takes time away from them and their families. So having that conversation with your adult child so they can help you find care, or having that conversation with your spouse if that situation can be had, if they're not cognitively declined or in a situation where they can't really truly give feedback on their own care. So it's a conversation, and it starts with just that, the conversation on how collectively as a family we're going to take care of our loved ones so we're not taking time away from our own lives, because that will build resentment. What is the most costly mistakes caregivers make when dealing with doctors and hospitals is not having a directive, a power of attorney in place. That is the biggest mistake. Because if you find yourself in a situation where you don't know what your mom or dad want and you have to make these decisions, you need a power of attorney. You need something in place saying exactly what it is that they want and how they want it done instead of guessing. I see that all the time. And I feel like that's one of the biggest mistakes that adult children make as caregivers, not having those directives in place. And that's where having that conversation comes from. Because if you have those conversations, then you're going to have those things in place. And hopefully, if you don't have those things in place, it gives you an opportunity to have that conversation. And what is the fix for this? Again, having a power of attorney in place and knowing exactly what your loved ones want and need in the event you should make those decisions for them. That for me, I think is the biggest thing, is having a power of attorney in place and understanding what your loved ones need in their time. Identifying these common mistakes is the first step, but the real work begins with implementation. To help you move from theory to action, I've created 2 essential resources. First, subscribe to our free newsletter and receive the key takeaways and action steps right from this episode. Second, join our Give a Care LinkedIn group to share your successes and get real-time support from a community that truly understands. You'll find all the links in the show notes. Remember, I see you and you're not alone. Now let's get back to the final challenge. Final recap. Having a conversation, having your power of attorneys in place. Don't do it all by yourself. Ask for help and be prepared for the physician. Have your notes ready for the doctor. And my challenge for you this week is to have that conversation with your parents or with your children or your spouse, and having your powers of attorneys in place. And if you do have your powers of attorneys in place and it's been 5 or 6 years since you reviewed it, have an attorney, an elder law attorney or someone who does estate planning to review it for you so you know that it's up to date, or even think about some things that you need to add in those directives. So that's my challenge for you this week. This episode exposed the common mistakes that steal your control. You now have the fixes all anchored in the Give of Care framework. Here are 2 immediate actions to claim control. Stop sabotaging. Choose the fix for the mistake that hit you the hardest. whether it's dumping the martyr mindset or ending zero boundaries and implement it today. Subscribe if the solutions in this episode help you gain a clear, immediate plan. Thank you for choosing confidence. We'll talk soon.